In the year 2000, if you owned a mobile phone, there was a good chance it had one name on it. Nokia. 1 in 3 phones sold on Earth came from this one company. They didn't just make phones. They defined what a phone was. But 14 years later, the division that built this empire was sold off for scraps. Its own engineers watched as the brand they built was carried away in a deal that would go down as one of the biggest disasters in corporate history. This is the story of how the most dominant phone company on the planet let it all slip away, one decision at a time. Nokia started as a Finnish paper mill in the 1800s, of all things. Over the next century, it reinvented itself again and again. Rubber, cables, electronics, until by the 1990s it had bet everything on one product, the mobile phone. It was a bet that paid off spectacularly. The Nokia 51110, the Nokia 11100, still one of the best-selling electronic devices ever made. These weren't just gadgets. They were practically indestructible, dead simple to use, and everywhere. By the mid-2000s, Nokia commanded nearly half of the entire global smartphone market. Half. No competitor came close. Behind the scenes, Nokia had also pioneered something few people talked about: Symbian, one of the very first true smartphone operating systems. It let you check email, browse the web, and download applications, years before most people had ever touched a touchscreen. Nokia wasn't just winning. It looked untouchable. Then, in 2007, everything changed. Apple unveiled the iPhone, a device built not around buttons, but around touch and around apps. Inside Nokia, the reaction was muted. Some engineers reportedly saw it as a novelty, a niche product that could never scale to hundreds of millions of units the way their phones did. A year later, Google released Android, free for any manufacturer to use, and built from the ground up for this new touchscreen, app-driven world. Nokia had a chance to move fast. Instead, it clung to Symbian, a system built for a different era. There was an attempt at a modern replacement, an operating system called MIMO, but internal politics and slow execution meant it never became the company's true answer to the iPhone. Year after year, Nokia kept shipping incremental updates to an aging platform, while a new generation of smartphones redefined what customers expected. The company that once anticipated the future was now reacting to it, always a step behind. By 2010, the cracks had become a canyon. Nokia's market share, once nearly 50%, was in free fall. The board made a dramatic move. They brought in an outsider, Steve Ballmer, a Canadian executive from Microsoft, to become CEO. It was the first time in the company's history a non-Finn had taken the top job. Ballmer's diagnosis was blunt. In an internal memo that leaked to the public, he famously compared Nokia's position to a man standing on a burning oil platform, forced to make a desperate jump. His solution stunned the industry. Instead of adopting Android, free, proven, and already gaining massive momentum, Nokia would abandon Symbian entirely and bet its future on Microsoft's Windows Phone. It was a partnership between two companies that were both losing the smartphone war. Hoping together they could build a third ecosystem to rival Apple and Google, the market's verdict was swift and brutal. Nokia's stock collapsed, thousands of jobs disappeared, and its share of the global smartphone market kept sliding from nearly half to a small single-digit fraction within just a handful of years. By 2013, Microsoft's own CEO Steve Ballmer decided the only way to truly compete with Apple and Google was to own the hardware too. His target, Nokia's entire phone division. The price tag, $7.2 billion. On paper, it made sense. Nokia still sold over 250 million handsets a year. Overnight, Microsoft would become the world's #2 phone maker. But the acquisition was troubled from the start, tangled in legal approvals, tax disputes, and the sheer difficulty of merging a century-old Finnish industrial company into an American software giant. And then, barely a year after the deal closed, everything unraveled. Microsoft's new CEO, Satya Nadella, made the call that confirmed what many had feared. The Nokia acquisition had failed. Microsoft wrote off $7.6 billion, more than it had paid for the company in the first place, and cut nearly 8,000 jobs, most of them in Finland. It wasn't just a bad deal. It was, by some measures, one of the most expensive miscalculations in the history of the tech industry. In 2016, what remained of the Nokia phone business was sold once more, this time for just $350 million, a fraction of what Microsoft had paid only 2 years earlier. Nokia itself survived, refocusing on telecom network infrastructure, but the consumer brand that once defined mobile phones for a generation never fully recovered. Later attempts at a comeback, including new phones released under license in the 2020s, generated nostalgia, but never dominance. So, what actually killed Nokia? It wasn't a lack of engineering talent, and it wasn't bad luck. It was a company that mastered hardware, but underestimated software and ecosystems, and a leadership culture that moved cautiously in a market that demanded speed. Nokia didn't get disrupted overnight. It got disrupted one delayed decision at a time. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of this story. It wasn't a failure of ambition. It was a failure to recognize quickly enough that the rules of the game had already changed. Here's the question worth sitting with. What if, back in 2011, Nokia had chosen Android instead of Windows Phone? Would you still be carrying one in your pocket today? Let me know what you think in the comments. And Nokia's fall is just one chapter in a much bigger story. Some empires collapse under scandal, and some rise higher than anyone thought possible. If you want to see how a $200 billion company vanished almost overnight, check out our video on the Enron scandal. And if you're curious how one man is on track to become the world's very first trillionaire, watch our Elon Musk video next. Subscribe for more, because this is only the beginning.